Hey, thanks for tuning in to Cube Outside the Box. We're going to talk about Cube. It's going to get weird. I'm JJ. I'm your personal Cube connoisseur. Today we're going to do a quick first impressions on the new set, Ikoria Lair of Behemoths. I'm very excited about it. I can't wait for pre-release. And even more than that, I can't wait to take some of these sweet, sweet cards and jam them into my cube. So let's talk about what we're going to be adding. All right, so I am crazy excited for Ikoria. This looks like a really fun set. I think there's a lot of great cubable cards in here. I think it's going to make a great pre-release environment, which is one of my favorite ways, of course, outside of Cube, to play Magic. And I think that just in general, it's very flavorful, and they've taken a lot of stuff from recent sets and kind of learned from that and applied it in some the same, but some new and different ways. So I'm not going to do like a full-on hot takes here. I'm not going to go through every card because there's plenty of people who are going to do that, but I do want to kind of go over a couple ideas that I have on Ikoria, or rather Unstable 2.0 as I like to call it. Take a minute and get your tinfoil hat, because I have a really crazy idea that Unstable was basically a practice run for what turned into Ikoria Lair of Behemoths. First and foremost, and least convincingly, the set symbol looks just like the acorn on the acorn stash from Unsanctioned, so I think Ikoria is basically an unset in disguise. Mero just revealed on Twitter, as of me recording this, it was last night, that he had designed Super Duper Death Ray. I always want to call it Super Duty Death Ray. He had designed Super Duper Death Ray for the Unstable set, which you can see by the symbol here also got reprinted in Unsanctioned. It was the first spell to have Trample on it, and I think it's pretty well known that the unsets are, in fact, kind of a playground where they try out ideas they're not sure would work in Black Border. Not all of them make it over, but I do think that that's a place where they really think about kind of experimenting with stuff and seeing how it plays out and using that as like a playtesting area that isn't going to piss people off. So Flame Spill is virtually the same card. It's still 3 mana for 4 damage. It's still an instant. The excess damage rolls over to the creature's controller instead of having Trample, because I guess there's some behind the scenes stuff that they don't want to mess with, but it's basically the same card. So I'm pretty well convinced that Mutate originated from the Host Augment mechanic from Unstable. It started Unstable, there were some that reprinted in Unsanctioned, but basically the way it works is you have a host creature and you have a creature card with Augment. They both count as creature cards. When you have a host creature on the battlefield that you control, you can augment it using an Augment card, and the two creatures become one. Just like with Mutate, if you destroy the creatures, they both go to the graveyard. If you say, tuck this creature 2 cards from the top of your library, that happens to both cards, and you get to pick the order. If you flicker it, with Augment, they don't come back as individual cards because the Augment card cannot exist on the battlefield by itself. It has to be attached to a host creature. But with Mutate, if you flicker them, you'll get all the creatures on it back individually, which is pretty cool because it prevents you from feeling like you're going to get X for 1 when something gets something's going to get targeted and you're going to like ephemerate it out of the way. So it's pretty clear that one originated in Unstable and that they basically took that and turned it into Mutate. And for further proof, notice that on Surgeon Commander, which was printed in Unsanctioned before Ico began spoiler season, they had Mutate already written out here. And it's clear that Augmenting, Enchanting, and Mutating are being treated the same way on this card because they have a similar feel where you're combining multiple cards into one sort of Voltron type power card that has effects from all of the cards that are attached to it. Last but not least, I think it's very unset-like for all these creatures to have so many different weird non-matching creature types. That, or Simic got to this plane long before anyone else. One of the two. Alright, so let's go real quick over the new mechanics. I'm not going to go in depth because there are a lot of people already doing that. If you need help finding some research on that or you have some questions, definitely hit me up. I would be happy to either answer that in text form, or if people need or want me to do a more in-depth dive on the mechanics, I'm happy to do that. But I'd really rather focus on getting to the cube information first and foremost. But real quick, there are a number of cards with the Mutate mechanic. Mutate lets you spend an alternative cost to play a creature card either on top of or underneath another non-human creature. It has to be a non-human, so you can't mutate humans, but you can mutate anything else. A little bit of trivia there. There are a couple Gideons that you can actually mutate. Look those up. So when you mutate something under or above, the cards combine all of their text boxes, basically, all of their abilities, and then you use the power and toughness from the top card. For most targeting effects, they are treated as one card, one creature, and then depending on what that effect is, you might have to separate the pile, or they might all go to the same location. It just depends. The other one is Companion, and this one's kind of weird because it gets super meta. So Companion has a deck building requirement where your deck has to have meet some kind of requirement that's laid out on the card. It's individual to each card. And then if you meet that requirement, you can cast one copy of that Companion card from outside the game. In higher RELs, that means it's got to be in your sideboard. If it's kitchen table, it means you got to own it, I guess. That's up to you and your friends. So, but either way, you do have to meet that deck building requirement, and you get to free roll just once. You don't get to do it 4 times from the sideboard. Even if there are multiple copies on the sideboard, you can't cast all of them into the game. You can only do that one time. Generally, there are a lot of these that offer pretty high power level, it seems. So I think depending on the construction of your cube, it's worth looking at these and seeing if any of them are easy or hard. Like for me, the even mana cost, like in this one, may or may not work, but there is one where all the cards have to have the same type. My main cube is all creatures. That one would be super easy, and in fact, because of that, might be almost too busted to include. We'll see. So Ico introduces a really neat concept where you get keyword counters. You can put a counter on a creature that gives it something like Hexproof or Menace or Death Touch or Lifelink. There are other ones as well, like Flying are all in there. And this is really neat because, as I know from my main cube, most creatures that have these keywords either have a higher cost or a lower power and toughness. Unless you're questing beast, in which case, fuck it, you get whatever you want. Let's throw everything in there. But for most creatures, you lose something to gain one of those things. So being able, Grim Dancer comes in with them, but there are lots of ways that some cards can put those counters on other creatures. And that's really cool because you could have an understated creature or an overstated creature like a big dumb idiot, a 4 mana 5/5 that you can throw Hexproof or Lifelink or Indestructible on and augment it that way using another card. But depending on how you got that counter on there, it may not feel as much like a 2-for-1 if you still get a creature out of whatever, if the card that you used to put the counter on there was a creature or an enchantment or something, then you don't necessarily feel like you're losing out on that. Okay, so I am going to do a little bit of like a hot takes or first impressions in some cards, but I want to be clear. I'm not just looking at the most powerful or most obvious cube cards that are going in there. First of all, like I said, lots of other people are going to be doing that content, and I'm happy to let them carry the torch on that. What I'm looking at is some of the spice that I think we need to take a second look at. Some of these cards might fly under the radar, and I might be wrong about some of them, of course, but these are cards that I'm really excited to try out and see what they feel like in some of the unique cube environments that I'm designing and that I've seen out there. So the first one is a 3-color walker, a new Narset. First of all, the art on this is just fantastic, and if you haven't seen it, please take the time to go look up the extended art. It is absolutely fucking gorgeous. But what I'm excited about here is I feel like the +1 on this for a 4 mana 4 loyalty walker probably is a little underwhelming. First of all, gaining 2 life, what the fuck ever. Second of all, adding mana with a restriction where you can only use it for a non-creature spell can be bad, but I want to bear in mind that in a lot of cubes, there are some really solid 1 mana artifacts, and there are some really solid 1 mana instants like Lightning Bolt or Path to Exile. So this can protect itself maybe more than you think if you're in the spells deck. If you manage to pick up a Jeskai spells deck, get this out on 4, drop a Lightning Bolt or a Path to Exile or Swords or whatever with it, clear up the opponent board a little bit, you might be in a good place to protect her long enough to either work your way up to the ult or at least to use the -2 a couple times. That's the other thing. Bear in mind that the -2 on this says you may discard a card. So you definitely draw a card. So a 4 mana walker that can draw you 1, probably 2 if you can protect her, 2 cards, is not bad at all. If you discard that card, you can use it like a Lightning Bolt. So again, if you're sitting on a 3 mana instant or a 3 mana sorcery that you just aren't planning to cast anytime soon, drop Narset, draw a card, discard it. That basically lets you loot, and then you can also turn that into a burn spell. So she has lots of ways to protect herself early on, and then the payoff for getting into her ult, which I think seems unlikely, but you only have to up her twice, or up her once and proliferate, of course, to get to that ult. On every time you cast a non-creature spell, the emblem's going to deal 2 damage to any target. So again, you just turn all your artifacts, enchantments, instant sorceries, other planeswalkers into burn spells. I think this is going to be really fun in certain cubes. I'm definitely going to try it in one of the cubes that, spoiler alert, later on I'm going to release a video building and of me building it. So I'm pretty excited to see how this plays out. I don't think it has a place in every single cube. It's probably underpowered for like a powered cube or a high-powered, unpowered cube. But I do think that certain novelty cubes could use this as a little bit of spice. And I think this could make a really fun Jeskai deck where normally you get into this stuff and is it? I think adding white could really be an interesting way to try and play this out. So Grim Dancer kind of represents a few cards that I'm excited about, but this one in particular I think is really neat. The modularity of being able to have it either have any two of the three, Menace, Death Touch, and Lifelink, like every combination of two of those three is pretty neat. Menace Death Touch is terrifying because that means you're getting a minimum of two creatures with it. Having these different, the different options here I think is really neat. I'm super excited to see how many different decks this can kind of quietly support. And by quietly I mean holy fucking shit, because it is a nightmare and this art is terrifying. Okay, so there's a cycle of ultimatums that already existed and now we're getting the other 5 because they're all in 3 colors. So this one in particular I think has a lot of implications. There are a lot of win cons you can dig up from your graveyard using this, and being in black-green means that it's pretty easy to get them in there. I'm actually a little surprised that this wasn't in Sultai colors, just because blue is sort of the self-mill color of choice other than black. But either way, I really think that this can slot in. Now, 7 mana is not nothing, but again, being in green means that you can ramp up to it. So it's quite possible that by dropping early ramp and some early self-mill and maybe even some entomb type effects, you could easily drop this on 5 and get multiple different permanents that are in your graveyard back onto the battlefield. Now, is this as efficient as just doing Entomb on 1, Reanimate on 2, and dropping your Gristlebrand, winning the game right there? No. But again, I think this has some spice to it, that this could be a really fun way to support a few different decks that could come up. And since it's cube and you know that everything's going to be singleton, being able to get your combo pieces back using this could also be a really fun way to support it. Ominous Seas. How freaking cool is this? How flavorful is this? There are a lot of cubes out there that could easily play this and it could be a lot of fun. If you have any kind of draw spells, or if you support any kind of deck that does like the draw thing, where maybe you have like Improbable Alliance or some kind of card like that, and then on top of that, I mean, you're just drawing anyway in blue. This is a great little control finisher. It's somewhere between like Thing in the Ice and Kiora the Sea God and Ludovic's Test Subject, I think, where you're going to have something that's kind of creeping up slowly when you draw cards. What I like better about this than Ludovic's Test Subject is you don't have to spend any extra mana, you just have to draw cards, which at worst, you're just doing every turn anyway. What I like better about this than Thing in the Ice is instead of casting instants and sorceries, which again, you're going to want to do anyway, you're just drawing cards. So you can focus on casting those spells or other spells to protect it however you want to do it. It doesn't have to be instants and sorceries. And then obviously this is better in some ways than Kiora the Sea God because you drop it early and build up and then bam, you just do it. If you do something really crazy like Overflowing Insight, you could just, do this a second time and make a second Kraken. That seems unlikely to me. The cycling 2 also means that if you get this later in the game, you can just toss it away to get something back. So again, not the most powerful card in this set, but something really spicy that could be a lot of fun as a build around or just as a support for an existing kind of draw control deck. And then lastly, we have Zenith Flare. This is a really neat card. It's support for a cycling payoff. It's kind of unfortunate it doesn't have cycling itself so that it can't pay itself off, but in a cube, this could be your kind of top end for a deck that has a lot of cycling in it. Now, that may be difficult to support in a higher powered format, so you definitely want to look at the overall power level and how many cycling cards maybe you already have, but it could be really easy to throw in a cycle of the monocolored cycling lands, or at least the red and white ones, some cards that have cycling with other good effects, and then Ikoria does have a number of other cards that have payoffs for cycling, or things that give you something when you cycle them. You could branch out into a third color, and then this could be one of a few possible finishers that just slams your opponent for that last bit of damage that you need. So I think this could be a really spicy addition to certain cubes that are more synergy driven or combo driven, or again, that just maybe already happen to have a number of cycling cards in them for whatever reason, because of the sets that they're based on, or just because that's something that you enjoy as a mechanic. And then I want to give an honorable mention to Ravenous Gigantotherium. Yeah, this big boy. Now this is from Commander 2020, but if you look at Commander 2020 and Ikoria, it's clear that there's some design interplay between the two sets. I really love this because it basically ends up being a sweeper in green. Now, I might be the only person in the world interested in this, but this fits my main cube super fucking perfectly. I'm really excited to jam this in there and see how it works. The Devour mechanic means this thing can get fucking enormous. So this is almost a green version of Caldera Hellion. It has a lot more Devour, and then the damage that it's going to deal is going to be reciprocated by the creatures. But if there's at least a couple like 1/3s or 2/4s in there, then you have a really good chance of killing a bunch of stuff off and keeping your Gigantotherium. If not, this is basically a 7-mana sweeper in green, which is a little crazy, but again, ramp is usually very well supported in green. So this is the kind of thing that you might be able to drop on turn 4 or turn 5, clear up the board, including maybe some of your own elves, and if possible, keep this on the board in order to have a giant creature to finish the game with. Okay, so that's everything I got for Ikoria. Again, I just want to do a quick little touch base on it. It seems like a really exciting set. I really can't wait to play with it. Hopefully this video is out before it's actually released. There are a few more spoilers coming at the time of the recording of this, so if I missed anything super obvious from the very end of the spoiler season, that's why. So if you enjoyed this video and any of my others, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button. I would love to have you as a subscriber. Please leave me a comment and let me know what I could do better or what you liked about it. Hit me up on Twitter, find us on Facebook, or just in the Reddit MTG Cube community. I can't wait to talk to you there. Stay safe, and we'll see you soon. The last thing that's new is there are now tokens that grant static abilities. So as you can see here, nope. So the host augment